It's the birthday of the novelist Thomas Wolfe, born Asheville, North Carolina, 1900, the youngest of 8 children. His most famous novel was Look Homeward, Angel, a thinly veiled autobiography. He was on a trip to Seattle in 1938 when he came down with pneumonia, which turned into tuberculosis of the brain, and Thomas Wolfe died 18 days before his 38th birthday, leaving behind enough material for 2 new novels, The Web and the Rock, and You Can't Go Home Again. And it was on this date in 1849 Edgar Allan Poe was found unconscious outside a tavern in Baltimore. According to the man who found him, he was in great distress and in need of immediate assistance. He'd been en route from Richmond to Philadelphia, and he was found on Lombard Street outside Ryan's Tavern, dressed in dirty, ill-fitting clothing, taken to the hospital, lapsed in and out of a coma, died 4 days later. Because he'd been found outside a tavern, people assumed that Edgar Allan Poe was drunk, and so the temperance movement made an example of him. Poe did have his problems with drink. He was liable to become very ill after only a couple of drinks, but he did have long periods of sobriety. He was aware of his problem, and so there's been speculation about the cause of his death. It was election day, and the tavern was a polling place, and there was a theory that a political gang had kidnapped him and drugged him and beat him and forced him to vote repeatedly at different ballot boxes all over the city. It was a custom at the time. It was called cooping. When Poe was found, his clothes were dirty and didn't really fit him, and he was a man who had always prided himself on his neat and stylish appearance. There's a relatively recent theory that says Poe might have died of rabies. Dr. Michael Benitez, a cardiologist at the University of Maryland, looked at Poe's case and said that first-person accounts of Poe's last days make a strong case for rabies. He was disoriented, he refused water, and hydrophobia is another common symptom of rabies infection. But in the absence of an autopsy report, there is no way to say for sure what caused his death. Here's a poem by Edgar Allan Poe, El Dorado. Gaily bedight, a gallant knight, in sunshine and in shadow, had journeyed long, singing a song, in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, and o'er his heart a shadow fell, as he found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him at length, he met a pilgrim shadow. Shadow, said he, where can it be, this land of El Dorado? Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow, ride, boldly ride, the shade replied, if you seek for El Dorado. Edgar Allan Poe's El Dorado. That's the Writer's Almanac, supported by the Poetry Foundation. You can turn your iPhone or Android into a virtual poetry library with the Poetry Foundation's Poetry app, available to everyone online at poetryfoundation.org/mobile. And by Quercus, publisher of Richard North Patterson's new novel, Loss of Innocence, about a family's collapse amid bitter betrayals. In bookstores everywhere, Quercus, stories worth reading, books worth recommending. Produced by Joy Biles, with assistance from Kathy Roach. Be well, do good work, and keep in touch.
This is the Composer's Datebook for October 3rd. I'm John Zeck. If you had arrived early for the gala reopening celebration of Vienna's Josefstadt Theater on today's date in 1822, you might have heard the theater orchestra frantically rehearsing a new overture by Beethoven. They had just received the score, and so at the last minute were getting their first look at the new piece they would perform that very evening. Beethoven's Consecration of the House overture was a last-minute commission and interrupted Beethoven's work on 2 bigger projects, his Missa Solemnis and the Ninth Symphony. This overture begins with a series of solemn chords, continues with a stately march, and closes with a fugue, a tribute, Beethoven said, to Handel, whose music was much on Beethoven's mind at the time. 146 years later to the day, another festive occasion was observed with new music, when on October 3, 1968, the New York Philharmonic, as part of its 125th anniversary celebrations, premiered a new orchestral work by the American composer William Schumann. His piece, scored for solo oboe and orchestra, was entitled To Thee Old Cause. Originally, Schumann planned an upbeat celebratory work, but the 1968 assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy changed all that, and this more somber music, dedicated to their memory, was the result. For more information, check out our website, composersdatebook.org. Composer's Datebook is a production of APM, American Public Media, and the American Composers Forum, reminding you that all music was once new.
This is Across Our Wide Missouri with Bob Priddy.
The State Fair is a rural institution originally created by rural people and for rural people. It was an outgrowth of the community and county fairs in a time when this nation was almost entirely rural. It is surprising, though, how many people from today's urban areas like to go to the fairgrounds each summer and wander through the cattle stalls and the chicken exhibits and the poultry houses. There are some differences now, of course, but to sample a state fair today is to share many of the same experiences our ancestors shared at the first state fair in Missouri. Not in Sedalia, and not in August. The story in a minute. Missouri's first state fair came at a time when quilting bees were common, when husking bees were still popular, when horses and buggies plied the unpaved streets of the cities, and when horse and single-bottom plows were breaking sod in many parts of the country. Horse racing, organized or not, was a constant source of recreation. All of these things are in the heritage of our state. It is these things that sustain a state fair. These things have been the ingredients from the beginning. Every August, you can walk through the present state fairgrounds at Sedalia and share the experiences of the past. You'll smell many of the same smells, hear many of the same sounds Missourians heard at the first Missouri State Fair. If you enter some of the organized competition at today's state fair, you might be entering the same categories in which contestants sought ribbons and prizes in the first Missouri State Fair. Although the midway is diesel-powered and electrically lighted with loudspeakers amplifying the hucksters' invitations, many of the booths that test your skill are the same kinds of games they played in that first year. You can still marvel at the intricate needlework, just as they did at the first state fair. You can experience the same excitement of a horse race, although your seat might be in a better grandstand. You can ponder how that giant squash was ever grown, just like they did at the first state fair in 1853 in Boonville. The legislature created the Missouri State Agricultural Society in February of 1853 to advance agriculture and hold exhibits and fairs. It was not a revolutionary idea. There had been county agriculture societies for some time, and they'd held various kinds of local expositions. The displays at Boonville, though, came from a dozen counties and at least one other state. A Kentucky entry finished second in one of the livestock judging events. Boone County won the most premiums, including top honors for tobacco exhibits. Howard and Audrain counties took home honors in the mule judging. Callaway County produced the top draft and saddle stallions. Cooper County won the most prizes for hogs. The exhibits were much the same as they are today in many ways. Clothing and other cloth items made of cotton, silk, linen, and wool were on display. You could win prizes for top exhibits in bread, hams, fruit, corn, tobacco, and wheat. The poultry exhibit featured chickens, geese, guineas, peacocks, Muscovy ducks. Livestock exhibitors brought in mules, cattle, harness, and horses. The Missouri Statesman, a newspaper of the time, described one exhibit that we think we'd like to see, although not necessarily experience. A rotary fan bedstead, which upon being wound up before retiring, fans one to sleep, keeping off mosquitoes and flies. Remember, 1853, they didn't have screen doors and screen windows and air conditioning. The first state fair lasted 4 days. About 4,000 people attended it the last couple of days. Some of the fragile grandstands collapsed on the last day, but nobody was badly hurt. Some of the same problems that bother modern state fairs were evident at the first one in Missouri. In fact, the first one lost money, $3,000. It was 1899 before state law created the fair as we know it today in Sedalia. The first state fair actually held there was in 1901. But even today, there is still much to remind us of the first state fair, which opened in Boonville on this date, October the 3rd, in 1853.
Part of the theme to my favorite World War II movie, The Great Escape. Makes me want to go out and ride a motorcycle and escape the Nazis, doesn't it? I don't know why I'm asking you, that's what it makes me want to do. Anyway, still to come on the program, we'll have the CBS World News Roundup in a few minutes, as well as popular tweets of the day, news of the weird, what's on TV tonight, and the song of the day. Right now, though, it's time for celebrity birthdays. So let's stroll out the celebrity birthday music, but after the movie.
Damn it, Jim, what the hell's the matter with you? Other people have birthdays. Why are we treating yours like a funeral?
Bones, that ought to be lectured.
Very, very many happy reasons.
And before I run down the list of celebrity birthdays on this third day of October, I have some special birthday announcements I want to pass along. First of all, to former underclassman and friend of the program, Doug Rose, celebrating a birthday today. And also to one of my 5th grade teachers, Mrs. Turner, celebrating her birthday today as well. I was trying to think what class I took under her. I'm sorry, Mrs. Turner, I forgot for a moment. I believe it was science, wasn't it? That was over 30 years ago. I don't want to give away your age. I'm giving away part of my age. And celebrity birthdays today. You share birthdays with these famous people. Drummer Tommy Lee of Motley Crue is 51. Gwen Stefani of No Doubt is 44. Neve Campbell is 40. Sean William Scott, remember him from American Pie and the Dukes of Hazzard movie? That's a horrible movie, by the way. Is 37. Speaking of the Dukes of Hazzard movie, when that came out in the summer of 2005, and I had some free time one Saturday afternoon in August, and I thought, I'm in the mood for some car crashes and chase scenes. Something to take my mind off my problems. And I went to the theater in Moberly. Now, they have what's called the 5 and Drive. It's one of the few drive-in theaters still in existence. But it also has a multi-theater complex there. Well, I went in, got my ticket, and I could have sworn I heard the ticket seller laughing or kind of snorting as I bought my ticket, and I thought, I wonder what that's all about. I walked in, and there was nobody in the theater, and I thought, well, okay, it's still early enough. Kept waiting and waiting, and thought, nobody's coming in here. So is this movie really that bad? And yes, it was that bad. All right, well, speaking of cars, let's all gather around, and I have room for one passenger in the time machine. Yes, I know it's a DeLorean. Just humor me, okay? Anyway, let's get ready to go back in time. And we're going to go back to the year 1988 to start off our trip back in time. So let me turn on the time circuits and start the engine. And on this date, in 1988, October 3rd, 1988, the Catholic Church announced that carbon dating test finally revealed the Shroud of Turin to be a fake. It was several centuries too new to be the authentic item. For more of Today in History, let's go to the Associated Press and some overmodulated levels.
October 3rd, 1995. In California, a verdict in the murder trial of ex-football player O.J. Simpson.
You, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder.
Simpson